everyone? Okay, thank you. Good evening. Welcome to the Thursday, September 26, 2019 regular meeting of the Board of Directors. I'm Kathy Baum, President and Apartment Owners Representative. To establish quorum, if each director would identify him or herself, state their district, please. We'll start at that end.
I'm Aaron Webb, fellow Lake County District.
Julie Bitzer, South Lakes, Vice President.
John Mooney, North Point District.
Karen Anton, Hunters Woods, Dogwood District.
Doug Britt, at large.
Okay, and we have some staff here. You want to start?
I'm Hank Lane, CEO.
Larry Butler, COO.
Anthony Champ, General Counsel.
And in the back, we have Melissa Kelly from HR, Chris Shoemaker from Capital, and Tom Deal, our controller, and Anna Barone, who's, Anna Donato, excuse me, who is DRB Covenants, just walked in. So if you're here to hear anything about Lake Thoreau Pool, I just want to give you a slight update. Structural testing of the facility began on Monday, September 16th. As of today, the engineers hired by RA have received preliminary results for the pool's concrete decking and shell. They are awaiting test results on the soil samples before completing their analysis and providing recommendations. And we expect to have the report presented at the October Board of Directors meeting. So we have nothing to say tonight on Lake Thoreau Pool. So I just also want to remind all the members of the board, we've got a really full agenda tonight. Our meeting is being live streamed and viewed by members, staff, and others with an interest in our organization. A reminder that if you have any conflicts of interest, please remember to state them prior to a vote. Okay, I'm looking for a motion to approve the meeting agenda.
So moved. Second.
Any discussions, comments, changes? Vote. All ayes? Aye. Noes? Abstentions? Okay, there's one abstention. Julie?
Vote.
Tom, did you vote?
Aye.
I have to remember that. Please remind me to mention. Okay, let's move on to the consent calendar. Can I have a motion to approve the consent calendar, please?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Madam Chairman, I would like to, no, I'm fine with that. Everyone.
Okay. Are there any comments, questions, discussion?
Can I ask a question before I object to the consent calendar?
Certainly.
My question is to Tony. I asked a question before the meeting, and I don't know that your response makes sense to me.
Okay, so the thrust of Resolution 8, and the reason that whereas clause was changed, because that deals with new board member orientation. And the whereas clause is specifically to speak to each and every director's individual fiduciary obligation. In Resolution 9, the reason that clause was left the same is because the thrust of that is, why are we having an annual planning session? We're having an annual planning session so that the board as a whole can ask any questions it needs to fulfill its fiduciary obligation, come up with a plan forward. So that's why that clause was left the same. If you were to make them mirror each other, it would, the change clause in Resolution 9 would have worded the thrust of the resolution, which is to say the whole board meets at this date, at this time, answer any questions we have, get some advice, and get a way forward. So that's the reason I left it the way it is.
I didn't see much difference in the semantics between to know of.
Okay, do you want to pull it off the consent calendar so we can have a discussion?
Yes. That would be, I guess, the second one.
9,
9, that's the one that you left the same.
okay.
So are you making a motion to pull off the 6? Do I have to call a vote on the other one?
You do not have to, she can just object to number 6, and
Okay.
it just needs to be placed at, make it G prime, or, I'm sorry, D prime.
Right before member comments?
After member
After
comment.
member comments? Okay, Julie, you want to make the motion?
I'd like to make a motion that it be right after member comments, item 6.
Second?
Any other comments? All the ayes,
Aye.
Aye.
noes?
Aye.
There's one no. Okay, the motion carries. So we've moved item 6 down to D1. Can I have a motion to approve the rest of consent calendar again?
So move.
Second.
All the ayes,
Aye.
noes?
Aye.
No abstentions, okay, it's unanimous, it passes. Okay, we're moving on to, Tony, can you grab the, list, please? Hi, Eric.
How are you?
Tom is on the phone. Okay, we're ready now for member comments. If you will step forward, you're allowed 3 minutes. If you will step forward, state your name and your address, please. And the first person is Richard Newland.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Richard Newland, 2216 Wake Robin Lane in Reston. I'm here speaking on behalf of the Design Review Board primarily, and there are a whole lot of issues going on with that, but I only have one issue I'm going to discuss or lay before you tonight, hopefully for some future action. We've got a very brief statement that I'll read to you. Members of the board, as many of you are aware, a resolution was passed in 2012 that imposed term limits on members of the DRB. Currently, there are critical issues with this resolution being applied. It takes members of the DRB considerable time to get up to speed and understand the process of applying the almost 1,000-page design guidelines to the hundreds of applications coming to the DRB. In my experience, it takes new members 2 to 3 years to develop a voice in these deliberations. There's a critical need to maintain a corporate memory of prior applications and precedents previously formulated in applying the guidelines. The constant turnover of individual DRB members, RA administrative staff, the covenant staff, and administrators increase this need. I've been on the DRB for 20 years and served through 4 CEOs administrations, Jerry Valoy, Milton Matthews, Kate Fulkerson, and now Hank Lynch, and have been appointed and reappointed by a variety of RA boards over the years. At the same time, the covenant staff has undergone several complete turnovers, starting with directors Marjorie Kruger, Sue Osborne, Bravetta Jordan, and now Anna Verone, and the ensuing complete turnover of covenant staff. The original 2012 resolution was intended to create increased diversity of the DRB membership. Until this year, no member has exceeded the 3-term limit prescribed by the resolution. 2012 was about the middle of my appointment before, so the first 10 years I was on didn't count. The clock started ticking again in 2012. Nonetheless, this diversity has happened and continues to happen with the natural attrition of our members. Every year, the DRB has an internal turnover from members moving on or not reapplying. In addition, finding new members has become a lengthy process. Over the last 10 plus years, each time a vacancy appears, it has taken at least 10 months or longer to find a replacement, particularly for the 6 professional members. Currently, the DRB is waiting for a replacement for a professional member that left the board in February. This causes several of our members to double up to cover the composition of the panel and full board meetings. We're now faced with an immediate problem. In January, February, 2 of our longest tenured members, myself, 20 years, and Neil Roseberry, 18 years, will reach the term limits instituted in 2012. This will leave the board already 1 professional member short 3 professional members short, not to mention the loss of almost 40 years of DRB experience and the corporate knowledge we have gained. The remaining 6 members' experience currently on the DRB includes the longest with 5 years of experience and others as few as 1 or 2 years, not to mention the loss of our previous 15 years of corporate memory prior to the newest member's appointment. That said, and given the amount of development under our purview and more heading our way, I feel it's necessary to maintain the level of experience and expertise currently on the board for as long as possible. We're exceedingly lucky to have members willing to continue on the DRB. I would humbly request the RA board revisit the 2012 resolution requiring term limits and rectify what would be a serious future weakening over time of the Design Review Board and Reston's ultimate future. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Next is Jeremy Novak.
My name is Jeremy Novak. I live at 2005 Halyard Lane. I've lived on Lake Thoreau for 39 years. I'm talking to you about the Lakes Boats resolution that's coming up for vote tonight. Although I'd like to thank you for many of the changes that have been made that have improved it, there are still 5 changes that are confusing or wrong. First one is a conflicting definition of owner. One place it states the registered owner must be present on the boat, and in number 1K refers to the registered owner, the owner as being a household member, tenants, or guests. A lot of people lend their boat out to their neighbor and stuff, and they also should be able to use the boat. Number 2, item number 7 on the items refers to lake-based events. All the details underneath the lake-based events only refer to swimming events. Therefore, the lake-based events should be changed to lake-based swimming events. Number 3, use and maintenance standards. Number 2K refers to eco-friendly or environmental friendly. There's no such thing as a definition of eco-friendly or environmental friendly. They're only advertising terms and don't mean anything in reality. Number 2, it says decking has to be, and number 2 says decking has to be 100% recycled wood. There is no such thing as 100% recycled wood. All the decking and materials you can get out there, 85, 90, 91, 92%, it just should be changed because there is no such thing as 100% recycled wood. And the 5th one is maintenance of the things on the lake. All homes, decks, and things in Reston need to be maintained. There are hundreds of boats and docks on the lakes. It is not possible, as is written there, it is not possible for the docks or boats to be removed from the lake before they can be maintained or treated. That should be changed so that they can be treated properly. The pollution on the lakes, by the way, has been reported from people on your board, is almost substantially all of it from off-site drainage. The new developments like Commons is going to be producing enormous amount of drainage from cars, and the amount of drainage amount of treatment, if properly done and carefully done, would cause almost no changes to the lake at all and no spillage in the lake. Those 5 items should be changed before you approve the resolution tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Next is Renette Oklowitz. Are you both speaking together?
No.
Okay.
Good evening. I'm Renette Oklowitz, and I've lived at 11927 Triple Crown Road for nearly 34 years, Reston for 40 years. I'm here along with Mary Ann Zayowitz, representing the Pony Barn Working Group. Many of you are new to the board, so we'd like to give you a brief history of the journey that has led us to tonight's meeting. In 2014, the Reston Association Board of Directors approved the convening of a working group made up of Reston residents and, of course, Reston Association staff, the first ever of its kind in Reston. We were the model for the working groups, to create a plan to refurbish the Pony Barn Pavilion, which is a picnic pavilion, and the nearby Butterfly Meadow, just a few yards down the path. And we were asked to suggest plans along with the staff that would be viable, which we did. We did a lot of research, we met a lot of times, and we presented our plan to the board of directors, the budget, everything, they approved it. And it took up until the spring of this year, remember we started this in 2014, to get the pavilion finally refurbished. It looks great. And thank you to the staff, Larry and others who led that work. We had a lot of challenges and delays along the way, which is why it took 5 years to get a simple pavilion remodeled. But to this day, the work's still not complete. The Butterfly Meadow, which was part of our initial plan that was approved by the board, and again, along with the staff at Reston Association, the plan was presented and approved, but it has not been completed. Our plan is pretty simple. It calls for a small overlook and an educational kiosk that would sit above Butterfly Meadow along Steeplechase Road. We realize that the board has a big challenge in approving what they're going to include in the upcoming budget. And because of that, we came together with the staff recently and said, let's cut this down, let's cut it back. We want to be responsible, and we want to acknowledge the challenges that you have and that all of Reston has really when it comes to funding. So we reduced our project by 50%. This project is now only $15,000. But we did it without, we believe, jeopardizing the benefits that it's going to bring to the community, and Mary Ann's going to talk to you about that as well. So we hope and we pray that after 5 years of work, numerous approvals by the board, delays, and challenges that were not ours. We didn't present any challenges, they were brought to us beyond our control. We waited very patiently for 5 years. These people came together over and over again. Unfortunately, even along the way, we've lost one of our members. So we hope that you'll agree with us that it's time to finalize this project completely by approving a small amount of money that will allow the Butterfly Meadow to become a real treasure, we believe, for the Reston community. Thank you, and Mary Ann's going to tell you a little bit more about why we think it's important to do this.
My name is Mary Ann Zawitz, and I live at 11929 Triple Crown Road. I too was on the Pony Barn Working Group. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the meadow. The working group wanted very much to maintain the natural setting of the area. This process that we went through considered repurposing a lot of these things, but we felt that it was really important into the ecosystem of our neighborhood to maintain this meadow. It also provides learning opportunities because you're in the deep woods and all of a sudden there's this meadow. And so there's a great opportunity to engage people and to interest them in what's going on in the meadow. The meadow in a forest is a true gem. Now we have birds and butterflies and things that are not part of the deep forest. The meadow itself has been designated as a monarch way station. This year we had a tremendous rebound in butterflies, and I attribute a lot of it to the work of the wildflowers and the planting that the staff has done. And it's really something to see in the summer when you get up on the meadow, above the meadow, and it's just almost undulating with the butterflies all over. With the pressure from development in Reston and throughout Reston, the project that we're proposing provides an opportunity to add value to our treasured open space without destroying it. This is not a vacant lot, let me tell you. Well, why an overlook? Well, first of all, the property itself is 2 blocks away from Hunters Woods Elementary School. And it's about a block away from where the Pony Barn Picnic Pavilion is, which would be a nice staging area for any groups to come by. There's a Fairfax County path that goes next to it, but it's up very high. The meadow sits down sort of in a valley. When you're in the meadow itself, you really, because the wildflowers get to be 10, 12 feet high, you can't really see what's going on in the meadow. So what we proposed is an overlook off the Fairfax County path that would have educational kiosks and would also provide people an opportunity to look and see what's going on in the meadow without getting in and destroying it, or any other human involvement that might not be so good for it. When the project was originally approved, the RA staff went to the county and said, we know you're going to be replacing this railing that's alongside. And the railing was replaced, but the county agreed to allow us to have an opening.
I'm gonna have to ask you to summarize.
I'm almost done.
Okay.
Have an opening to get onto the overlook. That's never been done and it's still open, so that part is still sort of open there. But we want you to ask us any questions if you have them. Come and visit the meadow. We'd be happy to show you around. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tammy Petrine. I think after last night, you'd be too tired to show up.
Good evening. My name is Tammy Petrine, 2503 Foxcroft Way, Reston. I didn't know this was going to be on the agenda, but I can tell you I sit on the Reston Planning and Zoning Committee, and that group is recommending over and over, almost requiring developers not in RA property to come to the DRB. You need to have that expertise. It's crazy, and it's getting worse. Okay, what I came here to discuss, and I think Hank will like this, I got a call today, a very unusual call from a person who does not live in Reston, but who uses the Reston paths all the time. I have made gentle comments about this. It's a dog walking deal. And she called me today and she said, you know, I was talking with my husband and we really want to contribute to the cost of maintaining the pathways because we use them and that's our duty. We feel that. And I'm going, okay. She called member services and got wildly inaccurate information. I'm not going to go through that here on camera, but she wanted to give money to RA and was told it wouldn't be possible. So I think we need to discuss that and have a little way that people can give money to RA for that. And she specifically mentioned, you know, couldn't we have Friends of Reston? And I said, there already is Friends of Reston. It supports the Nature Center. She said, oh, we already give to that. We want to pay extra for the maintenance of the path. So I thought you'd like to hear that. Yes. Thank you so much. And thank you for the work you do.
Thank you, Ben.
Donate to RA.
Huh?
She cannot donate to RA.
No, you can't
A 501c4 cannot accept donations.
Tammy, she can't make a donation to us.
She cannot make a donation to the association. She can only donate to Friends of Reston.
Because we're
We're a 501c4.
We're C4.
Yeah, we cannot accept donations. No.
But to Friends of Reston, yeah.
Friends of
Friends
Reston,
of Reston.
absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
501c3 can accept donations.
Okay, but
501c4
could you
cannot.
have another membership program for path
I
memberships?
suppose we could have a separate, yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, think outside the
No,
box.
Karen's been
Yeah.
talking about
I've been
that.
talking about that for
Yeah.
several months,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, yeah, like,
I don't want to be
Associate
the
membership.
only organization in the world who says no to money that's coming to us.
yeah,
It's
I
the
mean,
law. Yeah, we don't like to get arrested.
yeah.
So,
No, I get
It's a
that,
thing.
but there's
Well, I
more
know you're
than,
stuck on your
there's
foot,
always
but I know
another
that
way
ways
around
to-
the box. You could have a auxiliary membership, maybe?
Yeah. Thank you, Tammy.
I would pay the fine and then I would get arrested.
Okay, next
I'd be
is
debtor's prison,
Hannah
I'd be
Pollen.
British.
Hello, board members and association. My name is Hannah Pauling. I'm an owner in the Colts Neck cluster, 11909 Escalante Court. I've lived there for a couple of years now. I am currently the treasurer of Colts Neck Cluster Association and a graduate of a 5-year architecture program. Many in our community are opposed to the lighting of the pathways as currently proposed. I only found out about this today, and my neighbor who told me about it only found out about it through some sort of social media in Reston that she's very adamant about following. I'm particularly upset that any project is not, especially of this scale, is not given to every Reston resident in that area or affecting that area via notification through mail, just like is required of us when we do things. I recently received a giant packet in the mail about just a small sign in one of the apartment complexes near my home. So, anyway. Those who back up to that park area are especially vocal, and I have a petition here of just 12 of my neighbors that I was able to talk to today in the couple of hours that I had, who also say that they oppose the current lighting suggestion. We believe that we are stakeholders in this project, and we strongly feel that this knee-jerk reaction to a problem in the area is not well-defined. If anyone here is not aware, there was a unfortunate death of someone in the woods behind the Safeway area near to my home. We would like the association to define the problem prior to lighting and use only lighting in the areas where it would be most effective. We would like a mock-up and professional input regarding all of the principles at hand, pedestrian lighting and woodlands. We would like time to develop a position on this. And as I said, we really need to be notified about this ahead of time and via mail. I mean, I'm 30 years old and I can't be on social media that much. I have a packet here detailing all of the facts behind our proposition, or our opposition, sorry. One last comment, I guess. The main concern for me and for many others is that the lighting proposed is street lighting and not pedestrian lighting. And that type of street lighting actually makes it less safe, not more safe, for those of us who walk on those pathways at night. Brief explanation, big lights on a path.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to have you summarize it up and finish.
Big lights on a path messes with your night vision, and you can't see if someone might be in the woods around you to harm you. Whereas lights that light your pathway allow you to not trip and allow you to maintain the ability to see. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who wants to speak who did not sign up?
I have a comment based on the member comments. The last time somebody talked about pedestrian lighting, we said we'll take up the study that was done before on pedestrian lighting and do something with it. There was actually a death, if you recall, due to insufficient lighting. And this was a few months ago. I think we should look at that. We never did anything with it. So.
Actually, Larry's been doing a lot of work on it. He's been going to the design review board to work on it. And he's been working with the Reston Community Center, and he's been working with the Hunters Woods Community Coalition, I believe it's
I
called.
think we should give the members the update that. So we should let them know that we are working on it.
Yeah.
No, I do know that you're working on it. I oppose what is currently
Many
being
years.
suggested.
Okay, I'm sorry, you raised your hand.
Short. So I'm bringing it down here. My name is Jennifer Juszczyk. I live at 2010 Upper Lake Drive, and there are two things that I'm here for. One is more personal in nature, and the other is more, I think, community in nature. So I'm going to start with the more community in nature. When I moved to Reston, I didn't understand why you guys were all into planning and development at all. And I think I recently caught the bug. I've been working with a group about the Campus Commons development, and I just have a few insights related to that. One is I'm a little bit worried about Campus Commons development in particular, and about the proffer that's in there about RA membership. I thought it was a really easy decision to make that, all of these communities, new development should be part of RA. But there are things that these developers put in proffers that might actually hurt RA. And in this one, it's about stormwater management and something they call TDM, which I think has to do with money and Metro. But I think it's a more complicated matter, and just want everybody to take those into consideration. The other one is I think RA has an opportunity to be leaders in the community. You guys were at when the comprehensive plan was being made, and I think we're missing that opportunity as a community to come together and have RA show their support or their not support for the developments coming along. So I'd love to see that the board and staff are at these various meetings, but when you don't use that voice, that RA voice, then it's missing as part of the conversation. I'd also like to give Hank some latitude to be able to let his staff or make the decision as to whether to communicate things. When I learned that the board had to decide whether, you were going to have a staff person go in front of the planning committee, we just don't have that time, that opportunity. And I think you can give Hank that latitude and give him a framework in order to make those calls when you don't have time to as a board. And then the membership really needs to know what your opinion is on the developments. We knew when the comprehensive plan came up, but now we need to know when the developments are coming in. So I think I have somewhat of a solution. I found on the website Essential Elements of Reston is a document you guys have. And rhetorically, just think about when was that, do you know about the document? When was that document updated? And I looked, and the last time it was updated was July 2010. We're way far away from July 2010, and it was made for developers, but I think if you have a working group make that document better, you can use it for grassroots, for the community to get involved and to use the document, and also for developers as they are coming to the community and trying to fit in with the community. But it will also show the RA position in the community. And I think all three of those are important pieces of that puzzle. So thank you very much.
Jennifer, can you spell your last name for me?
Yes, J-U-S-H-C-H-U-K.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak that has not signed up? Okay, we're moving to D prime, I think we called it. Board and Association Operations Resolution 9, the annual planning session.
The reason I asked for more discussion about it was I was trying to understand the difference in Tony's choice of words. Just for reference, for the rest of you, if you didn't see the note, the resolution that had to do with orientation uses the verb to familiarize themselves with the association. Yet in the annual board planning session, the whereas phrase speaks to know as much about the association.
Do you happen to have like item numbers that we can refer to just so we can see it?
Item 6, C6. It was
It's
the,
on page 36 of our
mine says 30.
PDF, I think.
I'm looking at page 39, but it's the 1, 2, 3, 4th. No, the third.
begins at 36.
The third, the one in black. The black whereas. And there's a similar whereas in resolution.
Are you looking at the red line document? Is that what you're looking at?
Yes. Yeah, that's the only thing I'm looking at. If you're not looking at the red line, the one that's on page 38, it's the fourth whereas. It still says to know as much about versus the previous one to familiarize. And I'm assuming that, Tony, your intent as you were discussing it was that new board directors, new board members, officers, which are discussed in resolution resolution 8, that was an orientation, and you're thinking that the level of knowledge would be less, which is why you use the word to familiarize?
That's exactly why.
Okay. And then, secondly, with the annual board planning, you left it to know as much about, which would indicate that you have a deeper knowledge to begin with and broader sense. Do I interpret that correctly as to your thought process?
Correct.
All right. I'm prepared to make a motion to accept
Go for it.
item, well, it was it's resolution 9, annual board planning session as proposed in the consent calendar.
Second.
Any other discussion? All the ayes?
Aye.
Noes? Noes? Abstentions? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Will Peterson. I'm gonna keep my fingers crossed that this is the last time, buddy.
Me too.
We like seeing
At
you.
least for these two resolutions.
We like seeing you.
Okay, well, good evening again. I'm Will Peterson, the Watershed Manager for Reston Association. Continuing on for the Resolution 2 Lake Use and Access and the Resolution 11 boats. There were a couple of changes that needed to be made from the previous board meeting, as well as some additional corrections that were brought up at the BOC. Just to do a quick run through on what those are, some of which were made, or points made by Mr. Novak. For the the first thing is the owner definition. The owner definition is included in both the Resolution 2 and Resolution 11 underneath the list of definitions. And to make it more flexible for who can utilize boats owned by permit holders, we changed the definition to owner shall mean the fee simple owner of a lot in the association, his or her household members, tenants, and guests. And we thought that encompassed the majority of the people that would be using those boats. Continuing on for Resolution 2, under paragraph 2 of the general lake access section, there was a section that for general access is for the daily use during prescribed hours of watercrafts. There was a mistype there for by general access permit holders and their guests only. It was a general access section, and I accidentally typed permanent mooring permit holders instead of general access permit holders. It's just correcting it to fall correctly under what that section is. That's pretty much all it is for Resolution 2. The majority of the changes were in Resolution 11. Again, the first thing was in the definitions section, the owner definition was accidentally placed behind a different definition. That was removed. It was behind the oversized definition section. So we deleted that and made sure that it wasn't duplicated anywhere. Under paragraph 4, registration fees, we added the word boats in between any left because it was just left out and it wasn't proper grammar. As well as the same paragraph, we added an S to the end of boats to make it plural to encompass all boats. And then in paragraph 3, boat mooring, I think originally, or one of the older versions of this resolution had more sections. but there's no section 7 anymore. I changed it to section 4, which is the proper section. Because there was a little thing that says reference this section for additional information, so that was changed. And that is it. Are there any questions or comments that came up in regards to vote resolution? If anybody had an opportunity to review the documents?
Madam President, I do have a comment.
Certainly, John.
One of the issues mentioned here by Will and also by Mr. Novak was the owner, definition of owner. And in order to rectify the unintended prohibition of anyone but the owner himself or herself operating a boat, the definition of owner was changed to include not only the owner by title, but also any household members, tenants, or guests. But this extended or expanded definition of owner beyond its ordinary meaning creates awkwardness in the rest of the two documents because it's the common sense or legal sense of owner as the fee holder. So I'm going to propose that we amend it. I sent everybody an email, I don't know if it's said, but just to tell our listeners and our audience, I propose that we amend section 1A of resolution 2 in the definition of owner and strike the phrase his, her, household members, tenants, and guests. So it ends up being an owner is simply the fee simple owner of a lot in the association.
John, are you making a motion to approve with this exception?
I'll make it, I'll stop explaining and make a motion. So I move that we accept resolutions 9 and 11. We approve them, adopt them with the following amendments. In section 1K of resolution 2, and also in section 1I of resolution 11, we strike the phrase his, her, household members, tenants, and guests from the definition of owner, so that the definition ends up being owner shall mean the fee simple owner of a lot in the association. Secondly, I recommend that in order to make sure that household members, tenants, and guests can indeed use a boat, that we amend section 6B and replace the current language with this: use of watercraft by anyone other than the registered owner, his, and adding his, her, household members, tenants, or guests is prohibited unless one of those parties is present on the watercraft. So that will avoid awkward meanings of owner elsewhere in the two resolutions. Does that make sense?
I second those amendments.
Thank you. Any more discussion?
Did you wish to also have resolution 2? Wasn't there?
So I mentioned, there is nothing, that's resolution 2 where I had the second part. So for both of them, it's changing the definition.
I think you said 9 and 11. I didn't hear you say 2.
I'm sorry, 2 and 11. Resolution 2 and 11. So they have in common a shorter definition of owner, and 2 also has the addition of the words his, her, household members, tenants, or guests as legitimate users of a boat.
Aaron?
So I support the clarifying language. I also thought it would be appropriate to disclose that I'm a benefited off-lake property owner, which is mentioned in here. That may or may not be a conflict of interest, depending on how you.
So I'm also a lakefront owner with a pontoon boat.
I am a benefited off-lake property.
Off-lake Newport property owner.
You are a what? I didn't hear it, Jude.
He's a ball club member as well.
Oh, okay.
Any others, boat owners, lake? I'm feeling out of it. I mean, I don't have anything on a lake.
Do we have any more discussion on this?
Madam President, is Tom still there?
Tom?
Yes, I am, and I live on the lake and have a boat.
Thank you. Any more discussion? All right, all the ayes?
Aye.
Noes? Abstentions? Ben, did you vote? Did you raise your-
I did.
Okay, so it's unanimous, thank
Aye.
you.
And then just for an update, we are still working on the enforcement side for the resolution. And we were going to be presenting that at a future.
Take a break, Will.
See you next meeting. I can't.
Okay, moving right along. Eric, you can't leave, we're.
I'm going to get a hot water.
Okay.
I'm not going anywhere.
Time for the budget overview.
You want first thing?
Yeah, could you call up the slides, please? I'm confused the remote.
Is the budget anywhere that we can see it?
I believe it's up on
Should
the
end up being on both of the screens.
Right there.
So we can, like, we can't download it.
Oh.
Well, I'd asked for it to be included in the member agenda for that reason, so that the members can participate.
It's not in the work.
Yeah, I know. It's unfortunate.
Good evening. I'm going to give you a brief overview of how we got into the budget. Tom's going to come in and do a little bit more explanation. But let me just start with kind of giving you the strategy behind the budget, the themes. There are basically 5 general themes that went into putting this budget together. First and foremost, as with everything that we do, don't lose focus on our mission. Number 2, meet our members' desire for RA to provide the high-quality services and amenities as our key value proposition in the relationship. And we need to do this 100% of the time. Number 3, successfully retaining and attracting effective staff is the key to number 2. And we just heard Richard from the DRB mention he's been through how many staff changes. So I think number 3 is an important consideration. Number 4, generating new non-assessment revenue is one of our key priorities. And number 5, our budget decisions are based on research and data. And what's left unsaid there is not based on just opinions. So I've shown this slide before at another event. We had a joint meeting of the board and the fiscal committee. And basically what this slide is showing, to kind of not spend a lot of time on it, is that since 2016 to 2019, we have taken about $1.7 million in non-assessment money that was left or got from another source to subsidize our budget, which has created a bit of a challenge for us. If you look at this graph, the top line shows what the assessment cap could be by law. The second red line shows the trend in which we were tracking till about 2014. Tom's going to go in a little bit more detail about this. Here we go, sorry. The circle indicates where we are right now. And you can see the difference between where the trend line was and what the cap was. This is the proposed number that you're going to see in this budget. And what this number actually represents is 10 cents a day. Just kind of keep that in mind as we start to go through the process of what we're doing with this budget. We're literally talking about an increase of 10 cents. It's actually less than 10 cents a day. I've also shown this slide before because I would argue that by taking non-assessment money and money from other sources to offset our annual budget is essentially kicking the can down the road. And I find myself in a position of trying to fix this. And that's why you can see the spiky chart and what you can see what we're trying to do with this year's budget. The other component, what research and data has come into creating the 2020-2021 Reston Association budget is quite a bit. The board requested staff, a staff compensation study back in 2018, at the end of 2018 as we started 2019 because we had lost such a large percentage of our staff. And that study was indeed completed in June and presented to the board in July. Staff turnover data and exit interviews from 2016 to 2019. I've read through all of them. One of the interesting things to note about this
is since 2009, half the people that were identified as employees of the year are no longer with Reston Association. The additional work that was going into this is the Board Governance Committee has approved the vision, the mission and organizational aspiration adjustments, and that's going into it. That they're going to be talking about it, the whole board is going to be discussing that later on this evening, as well as the 2020 to 2022 strategic goals and objectives that the BGC has forwarded to this body to vote on. That's been considered. The Board of Directors and SLT have worked since July on completing several major components that went into the development of this budget. The first was a TOES and SWOT exercise and its feedback, and you can see the 3 dates there that indicate the 3 different sessions we've had with senior staff and board members, as well as all of us completing both the TOES and the SWOT exercise. The RA's customers and needs questionnaire feedback, you can see the 3 dates there as well, in which both the SLT and the board has gotten together to discuss this. The RA business model exercise feedback, and again, you can see the 3 dates where the SLT and board members have gotten together to discuss it. And most recently, as many of you are aware, we have been working with an outside firm to do both a brand and a positioning study. And most recently, we've gotten data back from them, which is quite interesting, and what our members actually want from us. And that's gone into putting this budget together. So the budget themes, assessment increase of less than 10 cents per day. Modest one-time capital investment of under $390,000 that results in year 1 non-assessment revenue increase of over $200,000. Lake house improvements that lead to increased net rental revenue. A yurt, which if you don't know what that is, it's kind of a fancy little tent building. A yurt being installed as an inviting new summer camp classroom and community meeting space. Significant improvements to RA's Lake and Plaza operations. 6 permanent pickleball courts established for this popular and growing member activity. Partial implementation of the compensation research study recommended by the board, which was completed, as I said, back in July. Increased total authorized positions, which a lot of you call the head count, by 5 from 101 to 106. And these include covenant staff to help improve the DRB process. This has already been approved by the board earlier this year. IT staff to address members' requests for a community app and other IT needs to make us more effective and efficient. Social media staff to help improve how we communicate with all members. And business engagement and sales individual to lead our growing non-assessment revenue going forward. In a nutshell, this shows what our staff headcount will be. And if you kind of look at the red, it shows that from 2016, 2017, we're truly only increasing staff by 2 full-time positions. There was a bit of a dip the last couple of years. So that's where the thoughts that have gone into this. I'll turn it over to Tom, if you're ready. Tom will go into a little bit more detail. Larry, if you can go to the presentation first.
Why is it not showing up there?
Hank, I don't recall the chart that you talked about the HR count in the Dropbox.
And we have one of our wonderful IT people here who's going to try to fix this for us.
No pressure, it's fine.
Hank, what was your presentation called?
Excuse me?
What was that called?
It's just the CEO's,
Was it in our Dropbox?
it will be, it wasn't, no.
Yeah, some of the slides were, I think,
Yeah.
which is why I got confused. Yeah, the one slide.
Yeah, this is from.
What page is that on, Julie?
That is from
Oh, that's Tom's, okay.
It's just the way it's shown. That's actually Tom's, and he's gonna go in more detail through that.
Tom, you still with us? Maybe it went off and just.
Let's see where the problem starts. And this is why we need more IT people.
No, I don't think so.
Just had it.
You have it, yeah.
There's too many options in there. I think we've done it. Thank you. No problem. Got a little huddle sitting here.
There you go.
Just a quick overview of the budget components for those of you that aren't familiar with what is the process of developing our budget. So I'm going to go through an outline. The first option is going to be how is the assessment determined? Second is how the assessment cap is calculated. Third is assessment and finance resolutions. And I'll quickly go through these, just if anybody has any questions, stop me and we can discuss it. The repair and replacement reserve fund, the budget process overview, and building a $1,000 budget. So the first item is how is the assessment determined, and that's by that deed section. How is this assessment determined? There again, the basis shall be equal amounts for each apartment, unit, or lot. The second component is after filing proof of qualifications, a unit might be granted a reduction based on these three criteria. How is the percentage cap calculated? There again, that's by the deed. In any 1 year, the sum of the annual assessment in any special assessment shall not exceed the lesser of these two components. A percentage cap and the maximum dollar amount based on the greater of 4.5% or the ECI. But since we've been tracking this, the greater has been the 4.5%. You'll see that on the graph. Here's the graph that Hank had alluded to that tracks from 2006. The assessment cap and the assessment rate, and also that red line represents the trend. Had we continued following along where we increased the assessment in 2006 through approximately 2014, you can see that the assessment would be nearly $867. And then I put together the timeline. Unfortunately, step one, we're still considering the level of sufficiency of the RRF, but right now we're on step number 5 there, where Hank and I'm presenting the first draft to the board. Some key points, the reserve study obviously factored into the capital part of this. We did one in 2014. We just recently completed one in 2019. You'll see the first rendition in this draft of what Chris has come up with as far as the expenditures and the level of commitment for the minimum balance and the 10-year average.
Key points, the CARF acquisition of new capital assets. Point two, CARF was segregated from an operating account. Can be used for operating expenses, repair, replacement of existing capital assets. And the board can allocate dollars to the CARF from assessment revenues, non-assessment revenues, or other cash surpluses. Just for those of you that haven't been through the budget process. Again, these are all the components from the budget: assessment revenues, non-assessment revenues, triple RF, the operating fund, and the CARF. These are all the components in this budget. So to get to the meat of this, the budget process itself, the first thing we do is calculate the operating expenses. Second thing we do is calculate the non-assessment operating revenues. Third thing we do is estimate the capital expenses based on a reserve study and the staff's proposed capital projects. Fourth thing we do is determine the minimum transfer amount from triple RF in the assessment finance resolution 3. And then use the above figures to calculate the needed assessment revenues to balance. And then we also have cash flow consideration. I'll go through this slide. So here's a slide on actually how we would go about calculating the assessment. If we had a membership base of 1,000, and 850 paid the full assessment, 100 received the tax relief at 50%, and 50 of the owners meet the threshold for the tax assessed property, this would be the calculation. It's an algebraic equation with those three factors to come up with the assessment rate. Is everybody? Just a statistic, this was 2018 and 2019's budget. For the 682 and the 693, we had billable units of 22,047. You can see the breakdown between those that were at the annual assessment, which ones were tax relief, and which ones were property threshold. There again, these were plugged into the mathematical algebraic equation, and that was how the units were determined when we look at the budget.
So I asked this question last week, and I see you've included a sheet in here on the elderly care and assisted living units. And I'm going to assume from the number that the elderly care and assisted living units are probably fellowship house, but are not the for-profit assisted living facilities.
That is correct. I can provide you with a list of
Okay.
all the apartment units that
Okay.
fall into each category.
Got it.
I can do that offline. So I just wanted to bring this up to the board. Going through the history, I found that in the 2014, in the year 2014 for the 2015 budget, we actually only gave a $10 credit off the assessment for the two later items included on there. And I just did a calculation on the side. Had we not given the 50% tax relief that we do, this is what we took off the table as far as generating revenue. I don't know, I couldn't determine. Larry and I looked at footage from the previous board meetings, and we saw where the fee structure, Schedule A, was voted on, but there was no discussion as how this came about. So maybe it was in prior meetings and we just weren't able to find it, but I just wanted to throw that out. The 50% tax credit on that is something you guys can determine. All right, Larry, if you could go to page 1. And for those of you viewing this at home, if you go to the fiscal agenda package, this budget would be included in that on Reston.org.
So you've got, which document is it here? I don't know.
It would be the Reston Association 918 draft one. It would be page 1.
Would you repeat where the
Sure.
audience?
On the Reston.org website, It would be in the fiscal agenda package for our 9/18/2019 date. If you look at the agenda package and kind of scroll down through, this sheet that I'm about to discuss was included here.
Is this the draft budget, right?
Draft budget, yes.
Yeah.
You have everybody has hard copies of your seat. Everybody else can see it.
It's the, Aaron's got it, that, it's the color.
No, that makes sense.
Different one.
You just had it.
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. That's
So what are you doing? Don't stand right there. It's like with the old.
Don't even
This is the
blink.
one you want, Tom, correct?
Yep, that's the one I want. As far as the documents provided for the draft one budget, there's a page 2 and 3. Basically, it's just summarizing the budget in different ways so that it can be, all my explanation and comments will be based on this page 1. Page 3 actually breaks it down by functional expense as opposed to department, but for the budget purposes discussed here, about this sheet. So in column 1, we have the approved 2019 budget. I also included the 2019 forecast in column 2, and then the draft 1 2020 budget. And then the fourth column is actually a draft 1 with the 2020 opportunities that Hank had discussed. When I presented to the fiscal committee, we only had the draft 1 2020 budget, and it didn't include those 2020 revenue generating opportunities with the income and expense. The fifth column is the variance between the 2020 budget and the 2019 forecast. And then I have the draft 2021 budget in the last column, which represents numbers. And then in the column that says 2020 revenue variance summary, the explanations there are basically from the approved budget 2019 and the draft 1 budget 2020 opportunities. So just to explain some of those increases or decreases out in that column, you can see under communications, we included $200,000 in sponsorships, which was a new item. And we've decreased advertising by $25,000. So that's kind of the difference between the two budgets. Under finance, we have new revenue generated at the end of this year, but it'll be a full year. That's financial updates that we can charge for. In covenants, the increase is explained by POA updates, revenue generated. The Nature Center, that's camp tuition. Camps, we expanded camps, additional weeks and full days, and we removed some non-performing camps. That explains the increase there. Community buildings, we transferred corporate, community, and wedding rentals from the lake house. So everything that was associated with the lake house now rolls up into community buildings or camps. And that was what was generated in the lake house comment. Aquatics, that increases due to memberships and lessons. The events and senior programs, that's family adult events and a Reston festival. And please, anybody stop me if you have any questions. And then in that column, for the 2020 revenue generating operations, that income was estimated to be $282,000. On the expense side, communications, most of the difference is explained by 3 new positions plus the benefits associated with those. I think Hank could put that up on a head count change. Computer support, this is an increase in internet licenses, technical support, and 1 new position plus benefits. Under the
1 or 2?
corporate board,
Tom, on here it says 2 new.
2 new.
Yeah, is it 1 or 2?
It's 1, the second position will be filled, but it was budgeted.
Okay.
Under the corporate board, since Hank's new, we have included some additional community projects. Under member services, this is increase in seasonal and a decrease of one position plus the benefits. Finance, this is due to an increase in software license, the member suites that we're implementing, and a decrease in legal and technical support, plus 1 position in the benefits. In operations, this is a decrease in the lease that was negotiated and the convenience fees. Covenants, there was an increase in professional fees, court-ordered repairs, staff training, and 4 new positions plus the benefits. The Walker Nature House, that was converting a part-time employee to a full-time. Then under lakes, ponds, streams, natural areas, pathways, and ground maintenance, that could all be explained to increase in materials, repairs, and maintenance. And under community buildings, that was transferring of expenses from the lake house. Then in aquatics, this increase can be explained by various supplies, labor, chlorine, pool, water, etc., chemicals. And tennis, this is an increase in seasonal. In events and senior programs, this is an increase due to the Reston Festival costs. And then land use, that was a decrease in the 1 position plus the benefits. Does anybody have any specific questions about the budget so far?
Are those lake house numbers somewhere broken out?
Yeah, I can break that out for you, how they were transferred to,
Yeah.
if you'd like that, yeah.
I would be interested in seeing those.
Tom, you keep saying Reston Festival. Do you mean the one that's this coming weekend? The multicultural?
No, not the multicultural, it's a new program
Oh, okay,
that they're proposing to do called the Reston Festival.
all right.
I'm just making a note about that lake house. Okay.
Yeah, so for people wondering what has happened there, in the past, the board made a decision to break out lake house expenses after we acquired it and we had the associated loan. And we wanted to be able to kind of look at like versus like, what's it costing us and what are we doing to generate revenue? With the loan being paid off, staff took a fresh look at that, and breaking out the lake house that way, it kind of introduces some artificial problems for the rest of the budget, right? You see there's a separate one that says community buildings. Lake house is a community building. You see ones for camps and things like that. Well, the camps are at the lake house, and so you have to do an artificial thing where you say, well, some of the camp revenue therefore goes to the lake house because it's at the lake house. Or if I move the camp, does that, change that number? And we thought, well, since we now own it fully and clearly and it's part of our portfolio of assets, we should treat it like any other facility we have. And so the budget going forward looks at camps as camps are intended to be looked at, looks at community buildings as they're intended to be looked at. So we've kind of untangled that. That's going to make it hard this next year to look at, how is the lake house performing last year versus this year. Going forward, it's a cleaner budget. It's probably a better way from an accounting standpoint to do it. you have to rip the Band-Aid off, and at some point, this was the year.
I was requested by fiscal to basically make 2018 budget actuals follow what we did, just so that it can be compared apples to apples and not be lost in 2020 as compared to, so that those numbers can be easily tracked until, we're comfortable with the way we're reporting, so. Is that correct, David? Yes. All right, so that takes care of the non-assessment revenues and the operating expenses. So now if we go down to the purple, the capital expenditures, there's actually a sheet we'll get to. Just remember the capital repair and replacement number of $4.453 million and the transfer number of 2.871. Those would be important when I show the next slide, just to go on. So just to note, let me back up. In the 2020 revenue and expenses, items to note, the lease discount for 2020, don't forget that was reduced, $434,000 for the lease reduction. The convenience fee expense is being reduced because now that we have member suites, we can tack on that fee on our assessment revenue. Whereas in the past, last year we allocated $104,000 to cover that because we couldn't implement it at the time. And then the health and benefits increase is also included in here. And in the 2021 column, just to put out
Hold
there.
on a second, Julie.
On the convenience fees, so the numbers that you're reflecting here going forward include both convenience on assessments as well as program costs?
That is correct,
Okay,
unless you tell me differently.
right, I just wanted to clarify what it was against. Because I know we've discussed whether to take them off a program.
That's why I made a note.
Yes.
Bring that to your attention. In the 2021 column, basically, it's the same numbers at this point, except for the 2020 revenue generated opportunities. Having a year implemented, we increased that revenue by 100,000 and then increased the expenses accordingly. And in that, we obviously bumped the lease back up for the 434, the 50% discount that was negotiated. And then, of course, the tenant improvements, how that plays out. And then, of course, a salary increase within those numbers. So back to the capital. In that 4.4 million, it includes two pools that basically a budget to be taken offline for repairs suggested by the reserve study. In doing so, the guards and operations expense were decreased in the 2020 budget by 89,000. And then if we were to follow this, the minimum reserve balance in the RRF, based on the 10-year average with the 10% contingency, was calculated to be that 2.871. If we were to follow this, this would leave a deficit in the account balance to keep the minimum reserve. In this budget, it was calculated to borrow $750,000 to fund this deficit, and the 82.5 down there is to pay the principal and interest based on borrowing those funds. We have several options. In this case, I've shown to borrow, so we could tweak the capital expenses, we could raise the assessment, or we could borrow. Those are our three options if we were to follow this.
So if board members, in my email, I said this is something we're going to have to consider as we do this. Right now, a past board established a minimum reserve in our triple RF of around 3.1 or so, 3.1 million. That was done at a time when they established this process and they wanted a cushion in there but didn't really know how to calculate that. And so they came up with a formula, they took a best guess, and it comes out to around 3 million and change. What Tom's showing here for next year is that with all of the capital expenses we have planned, we will dip below that based on what we're supposed to contribute. So dip below that reserve. It's not to say the fund will be empty. And in fact, if you look out over 10 to 20 years, it grows quite a bit. But very temporarily for next year, we'll be below that reserve. What staff has done with this loan is because the board resolutions require that reserve to be at that level, they've said we have to borrow that, or we have to defer some capital expenses or raise the assessment. Fiscal committee, we talked about this pretty extensively last week, and we're going to talk about this again. The thing that I want to put out there in your mind for you to think about is that 3.1 number was an arbitrary decision made about 7 years ago. I would like fiscal to also look at the idea of either removing that restriction or reducing that restriction so that we don't have to borrow for ourselves and then pay that back. It incurs an expense to the entire association that really is an artificial constraint that we've placed upon ourselves. We're finding ourselves essentially. We're going to talk about that in fiscal. I wanted to raise that now to have everybody start to think about that.
But the reserve, what did the reserve study say? What should be the?
The reserve study said that we are adequately funded.
Correct.
And this is just a short timing problem that because of the amount of expenses we have next year, we're going to dip below that arbitrary line we drew many years ago. And what this is showing here, and the $82,000 of an interest expense is us adhering to that arbitrary line. That's the cost for doing so next year.
Larry?
So the reason I asked that question is because the message that I got.
I called on Larry. Larry, go ahead.
I want to point out that 4.4 million, that is higher than, most of our recent capital budgets. And that's because of two projects. And that is Lake Road Pool and Hook Road, redoing the tennis courts, which have never been fully rebuilt. So those two projects alone are $2 million of the 4.4 million.
Your estimate is that?
Correct.
Because we don't know yet on the pool.
Right, but that's based upon, those are also reserve study numbers, and some of those Chris has actually vetted further. So just to let you know that those are two key things in there. And to go to Eric's point about, moving things out, for those who were in the fiscal committee meeting, Chris and I spent a long time, 2 Fridays ago, I guess, something like that, looking at and working with the other staff about, can this project go another year or two? CSF parking lot is an example, for those of you who have taken the tour. So we've already done that exercise, but we've left Lake Road Pool and Hook Road in there because we see those as relatively critical needs, notwithstanding the study we will hopefully hear at the October board meeting with respect to the pool.
Yeah, what was presented to the fiscal committee was that in 2019 and in 2020, 9 million will be spent instead of the typical 6 million out of RRF. And I think that should be looked into. So for example, in 2019, we only spent 2.8 million until August. And I don't understand, even if you consider those two to be over 4 million, that is a substantial increase in from our capital, from our reserves. So I think that the board needs to look at every project and see whether we should really do that. In 2019 and 20 spend from 6 million to 9 million, that's a significant increase in spending.
Julie?
The relook at how we calculate that line. I remember that being a discussion in the entire last year. Will we have insight from fiscal committee into what their thought recommendation might be for a better way to do that in the next
Yeah, we're gonna look at a couple things. So we're gonna look at this triple RF reserve line. We're also gonna revisit the question about the cash reserves at the end of the year, which you remember we had
Right,
an
yes.
extensive conversation. We've got another year of data, especially with the assessment mailing date moved up. So we'll be looking at that again, yeah.
Chris, do you have anything to add to Ben's comments? Okay. John?
Eric, how quickly might we reassess that? And is it simply a resolution amendment to change it? So could we in fact change it yet this year and avoid the 82,000 in interest?
Yeah, it's a change in resolution 3, where we set that limit and we would simply either remove the limit or change the number. My plan is to have fiscal look at it at the next meeting, which means the next time we come back here in October,
You'll have a recommendation.
we'll have some context from them to make a more informed decision.
Anybody else have any comments before Tom goes on?
Any comments about the budget draft one itself, or?
Well, anything he's said so far.
Well, I have comments on the budget draft one, so.
Okay. Well, we'll go to it when he finishes his presentation. Julie?
Eric, any recommendation to change that particular resolution, that would also be something that we'd have out for a member comment? We wouldn't, it seems to me that would be something we want to give at least a period of time for people to comment back.
Right, it would have to go to the bog, so yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Tom, you want to continue?
Okay. So going down to the net fund transfer, that 3.3337 billion is what needs to be funded from the assessments over the operating expense. And we've estimated based on that calculation I showed you as far as the number of units at full assessment, those at 50% and those prorated based on their value of their house, we come to an equivalent unit of 21,148. So that amount of assessment spread by those units comes to $728 assessment value.
That's the fourth column.
You see that's the green down.
Yeah.
So that's 4.
And then in 2021, you can see that's 736.
Let's see, 736.
And Larry, if you can go to the, I think it's slide number.
It's a different file, correct?
It should be, yeah. Item number 4.
You know the name of it?
Capital reserve.
Cash balance?
Yeah, that one. All right. So at the beginning of the year, we started with a cash balance of $9,109 million. Through August of 2019, we had spent almost $2 million, that's what the number there, on Chris's capital workload. The next 2 line items are expenses, future expenses. The 1.784 is a carry forward from 2018, and then the 1,000,004 is approved capital budgets remaining. So those funds are encumbered based on board. So those are taken out of the equation. So the forecasted cash would be 4.3993. So there again, if you go back to that capital section of my budget, there's where these numbers start coming in. The 2020 capital expenses is that 4.453, which I have another sheet that kind of details that out in summary. The 384 is the capital request from Hank as far as the 2020 revenue generating initiative. And then the capital contribution was calculated based on the 10-year average, and that's at 2.871. And then we factored in earnings at 2.5%. So if that's the case, the projected cash would go down to that 2.442. And then the 3.158 is the 10-year, the minimum balance calculation. That's how we get to that deficit, just to explain that. And there again, we can increase the assessment, we can borrow.
And that's the 750 borrow idea.
Yeah.
To deal with the 716. Okay, it all comes together.
Yeah.
Or we can tweak things.
Change the resolution, right, so at the end of 2020, right, so to put a bow on this, we will have if we spend everything that's encumbered, right, from 2018, everything 2019, everything 2020, worst case scenario, 2.44 million in the triple RF. The thing with the loan here is because that is below the self-imposed, that minimum balance of 3.158. And so the question is what to do about that. And it's borrow, raise an assessment, defer a project, or change that 3.158 number. So that's the conversation we're embarking on now. Or a combination of it. It can be some of each.
Does everybody understand this sheet?
Best explanation of the night for me.
Okay. All right. There, if you can go to the next slide.
Is it,
It's number 5, yeah, that one right there. All right, there again, this is Chris's spreadsheet. It basically has all the expenses out by the reserve or his massaging of the numbers is the way they felt the spending should go. So in that first column at the top under expenses, that's at 4.453, and then year 2021, that was the 378. The next column over is the 10-year average. This would be the amount of the contribution. That's at 2.871. And then in 2021, the 2.763. So the next column, third column under minimum balance, that's the question is how much we're going to fund, leave in the, as a minimum in the cash account, just reserves. And you can see on the far right column in the red, or yeah, in the pink red, that we do go below the minimum required in those years if we were to do the expenses as laid out right now. Does everybody understand that one? All right, so go to the next one, right?
Different folder, right?
Yeah, this should be the draft one, 2020, 2021 capital project budget.
Yeah.
There. This is a summary given to me by Chris that details out the budget total for 2020 and 2021, just so you can see. There's the categories of expenses that tie back to that number. So here's our presentation for the draft one. Any discussion items that
Could you say, Tom, what is, for the 2020 budget, the swimming pool totals?
Yeah,
What's
that's
included in that 2 million plus?
most of that expense is on Lake Road.
Can I?
Yeah, Chris.
Yeah, I'll let Chris, one of the reasons we don't show every line item is so we're not playing our cards in contractors. But Chris can give you the high level, about 1.5 of that is Lake Road.
Majority of that is Lake Road. There's also still a couple different projects revolving around light coats. A lot of our facilities have not had tear out since they were constructed, so in some cases you have 2+ inches worth of plaster buildup. So as a result, you have to tear all that and start over, which effectively doubles the typical cost of a white coat. So there's a couple of those in there that need to happen. And those kind of play into the factor as well. So they're pretty big items for those.
Julie?
As an example, the tot lots total, there's nothing in 2020, but there's about 25K in 2021. Is that part of what's coming from some of those budget suggestions that we got from members, or?
No budget suggestions have been included in this.
Okay. So that would just be improvements to current tot lots.
And that's a single top lot. Pretty sure.
Maybe if I could just add one more complication to my attention when it comes to the swimming pools. If it indeed is a rebuild, then more than likely you have to go into a complete design, and the money that Larry just suggested doesn't even cover it. So those are some of the, and we don't know yet. So there's a lot of balls in the air, and it's a complicated piece of work right now. And it would take, more than likely, it would take a year of planning and then construction time to follow, with obviously with the community's input.
Kara?
So I understand why, the detail can't be published, but, and what is the process for incorporating possibly the member requests?
The board needs to vote on those.
So for example, the Butterfly Meadow overlook is not in the
That's okay. Yeah, staff did not want to, unilaterally pick, from that vast list of things and say, we like this one, we're going to put that in. That is a decision that you all make, and if you instruct us, we will include it.
Do you have a list of all of those items and how much they cost?
I do, but I don't have it. I don't have it right here. It was sent out in the prior.
What's the order of magnitude, Larry?
The order of magnitude is huge because, for instance, one of the items was an indoor tennis center. So I would just suggest you go back to the fiscal committee board work session. If you go back to that Dropbox, I'm pretty sure it's in there.
Yeah.
And that would be a good place to start. So it's a range.
Anybody have anything else? Beth?
So I have some comments to make about the budget draft. Earlier this year, we had a detailed talk about the budget process, about how it's going to be different in 2019. I have to say it did not work for us in draft 1, and I want to talk about these points and hope that it'll work for us in draft 2. For example, draft 1 of the budget has not yet been shared with the membership. So they did not get a chance to look at it, come here and participate today and provide any comments. The copy that was provided before that, the copy that the entire board got was only yesterday, that is of 24 hours ago. So I don't know how much anybody can go through these numbers and understand them in 24 hours. I would say unless you're conditioned with these budgets over many months, it's not going to be possible. The fiscal committee received the budget a week before the meeting last week, and then many of us went through the numbers, and then it changed again the day before the fiscal committee meeting. So really all the work the fiscal committee did, including me in looking at the numbers, it didn't make any sense when the revision came up. And this problem has occurred year after year. So that, at least in draft 2, I request the staff that we, the fiscal committee, gets the draft 2 of the budget, I would say at least 2 weeks in advance. I mean, you have draft 1, most of the work's already done. For draft 2, please get it to us 2 weeks in advance and definitely post it in the, for the membership to take a look at before the next meeting. So some of the other things I want to mention is, I'm fine with most of the budget, at least 18 million of it, which is the 2019 budget. But then it was mentioned, it's 10 cents a day, that's the increase, but really I find it as a very salesy way to try and present that to the membership. Really what it is payroll costs have gone up by 1 million. Now I'm going to say some things that's going to refer to payroll costs, and I want to get this out of the way that I respect the staff and the work they do, but we are an organization that has a budget and we have constraints. So the compensation or the salary, the payroll costs have gone up by 1 million. And almost in proportional, the assessment has gone up by 900,000. So I understand there's a lot of talk about how we need to make sure that we retain the best talent, but really, if last year was an example, we know that none of the cost-cutting motions that were laid on the table really passed, which means that the staff got whatever they asked for. So even if it ends up happening that we are going to give this 1 million increase in payroll costs to the staff, I think the board needs to look at where this 1 million is going. For example, every year we've been giving increases to salaries, but we don't know where it is going. So maybe what is happening is we are giving every year $500,000, I think it was last year we gave in payroll cost increases. Maybe it's not going to the right place. So we need to see where is the allocation of where this money is being spent, because of which we're not getting the desired results. But I would ask that we look at it closely as to why we need to spend 1 million more in payroll costs. Out of the 18 million that was our budget last year, 18 million, most of it came from assessment revenue. In terms of expenses, we had 15 million in operating expenses. We had 3 million that went to the reserve funds. Out of the 15 million in operating expenses, half of it is payroll costs and paying for over 100 employees that we have. And so that's where the majority of the assessment money goes. It doesn't go to pools, trails, tennis courts. It goes for paying for our employees. The other thing I'd like to talk about is there's $384,000 in programs that has been baked into this budget. And none of those programs have been vetted out by the fiscal committee. So we as a board have to make sure that these programs go to cost-benefit analysis, a cost-profit analysis with the fiscal committee as per our own policy that we passed and put controls in place after the lake house fiasco. So we need to make sure that before any of these programs get implemented, one of the scary things I've heard a couple of times from the staff is we need to spend money to make money. And I want to nip that concept at the bud. We are a nonprofit organization. We really want to increase non-assessment revenue, but we not want to make that one of the tenets that we live by is to spend money by make money. The other thing is about the increase in RRF from 6 million to 9 million over 2 years. I spoke about that. If we have to spend on projects that we think we have to, that's fine, but it can be on a case-by-case basis. We just cannot approve 9 million without knowing what we're spending it on. Those are my comments.
Anybody else have any comments?
What's Tom?
Tom? Tom, do you have any comments?
I do not.
Eric? John?
I don't think so.
Okay. Joy?
I'm thinking that, to Ben's point about trying to get ahead of the budget exercise and having a bit more time for us to think through this, I appreciate that the staff's been working very hard at getting the numbers together for us, and we are under some time constraints. But I am thinking that I would benefit from another session that is focused strictly on the budget, sometime between now and when we actually need to vote on it.
Are you making a motion?
May I make that as a motion? I would like to make that as a motion then. That we have a board working session like we had before, just on the budget. So we had one in late August. I would like to see that we have another one, between now and, I guess we have to vote for this in November, do we not? Yeah.
The October board meeting.
And then,
Do you want it before the October board meeting?
I'm not sure they will you have enough for us to be ready with the fiscal committee needing to come back and make?
Well, I guess it would depend on what you're requesting to do.
Well, I think we need to look at the list of member requests.
Right.
You know, which ones do we put in to the budget or take out of the budget? I mean, they are requests our members are making of us, whether it's the butterfly field or anything else. It's clearly things that they want.
So
And if we have, so there are a variety of things like that we need to make decisions on. We've already approved 4 positions for, Covenants, thank you. We have theoretically supported Hank in his desire to improve customer service, to improve the website, et cetera. So we need to make some final decisions on that. So I think we need to have some kind of a work session where we can take items one by one.
Would seem that would be then before the October board meeting, because
But I do believe that fiscal, yes, Tony?
Madam President, to remind the board, is the way you guys did it last year, the meeting that you're talking about is the October meeting. You then called a special meeting in November for the hearing that's mandated.
Right.
And then you approved it in November. So there's not necessarily a need to have a special board meeting before the October board
I don't
meeting.
think that's your
Well, that's not
decision to
what,
make.
and that's not what I'm suggesting.
I
I'm
think that we
suggesting more
need to
time.
have, we need to have input to staff, line item by line item.
Yeah.
Before fiscal, I mean, I know you want to see things 2 weeks ahead of time, but without them having input into what we believe the members, you know, on a cost benefit route want.
When's fiscal?
Wednesday, 16th. So we can ask the fiscal committee for kind of broad, you know, financial perspective. But until we approve a program to have staff work up the specific, they don't have anything to evaluate.
Well, they've
right?
got the big pieces, but not like.
Right, but they have no way, they don't have any, there's not a meat there to evaluate that. You look at it and go, okay, $100,000, well, they need to, staff has to do a lot more detailed proposals before that's supposed to go to the fiscal committee.
Right.
Right, so the board says, yes, go forth and do that, staff, work up that proposal. It goes to fiscal, the board then, after having put it in the budget, still has to come back to the board to approve that specific project. So
Right.
putting it on now, subject to the thresholds that we outlined in the fiscal resolution where different levels of approval, right? So
Right.
this isn't the only bite at any of these new starts or programs for 2020 and 2021. We say yes, staff does a detailed workup that somebody can actually sink their teeth into and look at the numbers. We send that to fiscal, per the fiscal resolution guidelines, it comes back to us for our approval. So I don't want to put fiscal committee in a position of having to just imagine, right? I want them to have data. Right now, we don't have data on these because these are very notional until we pass them and have staff do very detailed
The only
work.
thing they could look at is what they've already, pretty much what they've.
What they saw
already
last
seen.
week, yeah.
Right.
So until we make some hard decisions.
Yeah.
I mean, I realize we would have to put a placeholder in because we won't have data back like on throughout, with the presumption that we do wish to fix the pool and still have a pool there.
Right.
So you can put a placeholder number in for there, but I would like to be able to say, hey, members have made some requests and be receptive to those and give some guidance back on those.
We can direct staff to take those requests and cost them out, right? We can do
Oh, I
that.
thought we had those.
Yeah. But I mean, we can say, you know, yes for this, go put some more work into that. And then staff can come back to us. We can do that as part of this budget process or just in general. So we can do that now or at any time.
You have a motion.
I do.
That's been seconded. John?
Point of discussion. Discussing this motion. So item K, Hank's going to talk about the strategic plan update. And when the board governance committee met, we talked about seeking a meeting, a special meeting of the board to discuss. So we approved the goals and objectives, but in terms of tactics and so forth, we had some questions about some things. We could combine a meeting on the budget perhaps, and on that level of the strategic plan. We were going to cover that. Kathy and I had talked about making a motion for that when we came to item K, but it could be combined, the two could be combined.
Well, my feeling has been that budget will dictate tactics.
They certainly interlink.
And I was comfortable with what we approved at governance for the levels that we discussed, the first, which were presented tonight. I think that there's some pretty big pieces that are kind of out there, maybe elephants in the room you want to speak to. Having just gone to a meeting that went to, what was it, 1:30 last night?
1:39.
I'm not really looking forward to having tonight go to 1:30. So my thought was that, given the foundation that's been presented to us tonight about the budget and all, and having a better understanding of what we have here, that's why I was recommending perhaps we could have another working session where we just focused on the budget, maybe dealt with some of these elephants in the room, whether they be salary or programs or whatever. That was my thought.
And my amendment to that, which I think that you've indicated there's a certain compatibility, is that we would also talk about some of the more fine-grained parts of the strategic plan at the same time.
And I think you will find that they get.
Are you making an amendment to her motion?
I make that amendment. I propose that we combine the two.
Do you guys see any value in including fiscal committee in that meeting?
I'm thinking about, making it a joint meeting. I don't know, it's just, I'm throwing like John introducing an amendment. So we have to, your amendment has to be seconded and we have
Right,
to vote on.
it has not been seconded.
And we have to vote on your amendment before we vote on hers.
Right.
Am I correct, Counselor? Or I'm learning. Does John have a second? Okay, there being no second, we go back to the motion on the floor.
Can you restate that motion?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm a little unclear.
I'm making a motion that we hold another board working session focused on the budget. I do think it very similar to what we did in August, now that we have more materials, that we can.
Just stop with your motion.
Okay, don't explain my motion.
I'm gonna make an amendment that we do a joint meeting with fiscal on the budget.
Second. Do we have a time frame?
Well, their next meeting is,
The 16th, someone
we
said.
have to do it before that? Do we get fiscal before that in the meeting with us? I don't know.
If it's here.
Was it just board attendance at the fiscal meeting?
If it's board attendance, it becomes board.
Yeah, I mean,
Once
we have to give,
Like,
I don't even know if I like what I just said, because we do need to meet as a board to give staff guidance, period. And then staff can then give fiscal what they need.
I think it's more efficient to do it with them. All eyes on the questions, all relevant eyes on the questions.
Did you accept my amendment? No, I'm being funny. My amendment did not get seconded, so.
Second.
Oh, I thought it
You
did.
seconded? Oh, you did? Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
Eric had.
Are you sticking with your amendment?
No, I'm gonna withdraw my amendment.
Okay, can I call the question? My
Is
motion,
everybody clear on the motion?
I'm gonna go back to Aaron's question, what time frame are we looking at?
I thought we were trying to do it before the 16th.
Right, okay.
Proposed date?
Well,
Are
I
we
think
gonna
we have to
include a
leave the
date in the
staff
motion?
has to figure out
I'll have to find something, okay.
when we can do that.
And we need X amount of days' notice, right, Tony?
Week.
A week. So we already know that it can't be before the 3rd.
Okay, let's, vote all the ayes.
Aye.
Any noes?
Aye.
No abstentions, motion carries. Okay, Eric.
Brief treasurer's report. There hasn't been a lot of change in our budget substantially from the last month. We are net about $540,000 to the good this year. And most of that is for the reasons we've already covered in previous months. See Tom with his sheets up there. I don't know that we anticipate anything unusual at the end of the year in terms of operating expenses. I mean, capital for sure, but, I mean, the summer season is done, you know, so we're, you know, capital projects pick up, that's not part of the operating budget. The drama in our budget has generally settled, right? We kind of just settle into the end of the year. So my 2 cents are I wouldn't expect that variance to change a whole lot. In your packets, you have the last sheet, the 8.5 by 11 sheet. This is the question we wrestled with last year and that fiscal will again address in terms of the end balance and how to account for that. It's there for you to look at. I don't think it's worth discussion right now because we still have really 4 months between now and when this question becomes, but it's there for you to look at. Thank you for providing.
Any questions, Eric?
Thoughts or questions?
Your report was the fees, right?
That.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Thank you, Tom. Larry, land use update.
Okay. So, got a couple items that I want to discuss with you. One of them is actually an action item. I'll cover that one first. We had somebody here earlier talking about the Hunters Woods pathway lights and spoken member comments about that. So there's an item summary that I think explains the history of it. And again, in trying to be a little bit brief, the board approved through CARF, is the new capital funding back in 2014, when Andy Siegel was involved, the funding for the pathway lights, the undone pathways or unlighted pathways within a quarter-mile of Hunters Woods Village Center. We've come to find out over the course of those years, and after getting DRB approval, that approval has lapsed, so we'll have to go back to the DRB where there will be broad notification of lots of neighbors when we do that to address the earlier speaker's concerns. But at the same time, something else that has happened since then is there's been a lot of concern about the Hunters Woods ball field, which is behind Christ the Servant Lutheran Church, which Reston Little League used to use. They no longer use it. Got to walk about 140 yards from the parking lot carrying all your gear, and they don't use it. So working with the Hunters Woods Neighborhood Coalition has been very involved with that, as well as a number of other stakeholders around there. What I'm proposing is that the board authorize through action, because the original funding was for pathway lighting, but because we've received approximately $81,000 in funding through a proffer from Hunters Woods at Trails Edge project, to utilize that, because that has to be used for pathway lighting. And we'll have to, based on ultimately what we do light, and in the graphic that I have in the package, you can see what we're recommending is only do this, I'll call it the string of pathway closest to the ball field and the village center. Essentially goes from the underpass that Ben Bolt is working on these last couple of weeks out to the ball field. And then we utilize some of those funds to study and design, working with the community and the stakeholders and so forth, something for the ball field to get some activation back there. And so it's the board action to authorize the use of funds that were originally allocated for the pathway lighting to study and possibly design and perhaps even implement, depending on what ultimately the community decides to have done there. And the letter that I put in here from the county, I asked for a request for interpretation of essentially the zoning and development plan filed with the county for that site. And we can do a lot of things there, if you read the letter. Now, there may be some other hurdles we have to go through, if it's a PRC plan or just a rough grading plan, depending on the size and complexity of it. But there's a lot that we could do there. And I'm not suggesting that we do anything at this point, because we need to, work with the community to do that. So the request in the action item is simply to authorize us to use some of the funding to commence looking at alternatives for the ball field site. And there's a draft motion in your packet for that.
Does that affect, the lady lives on Escalante Court, and I know where that is. What you're proposing doesn't go that far.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I think some people have been confused. The original approval we got from the DRB was for all those yellow dots on the graphic that's in the package. And what I'm proposing is that area that's basically circled in the red pen.
Okay.
So it's much more limited. And I think that's at least from my understanding, that is really the area that was of most concern, because it's actually closest to the village center. And when we put this out to the broader community, I'm sure we'll get some feedback. Well, maybe we should go the other pathway that goes up to the Hunters Woods Village Condominium Association, because there's 2 feeders there. And that can be added, but again, for right now, I think the goal here is we've got kind of 2 issues that have been, brought up by the community, and I think we have the resources available if the board decides to reallocate some funding to really look at both and to do that in tandem.
So it's just the red?
Hold on, I recognize John.
A question, Larry. I believe the speaker's name during member comment was Ms. Poling, Anna.
Hannah Poling.
Hannah. Even if it doesn't affect her neighborhood, I think her question is valid for any project we would do for trail lighting. And we did discuss lighting standards a year and a half, 2 years ago, whatever it was. So are we using would we be using lighting standards that do indeed promote safety and prevent incitement to mischief? In other words, there's path lighting and path lighting, and she was commenting on a time that did not increase safety, but increased danger, actually. So what standards would we be using in our path lighting?
We're working with Dominion right now. And another piece of information that's important, I think it's in the thing, but I'll narrate that, is that when we originally were working with Dominion on this, there were not LED lights available for pathway lighting, and there are now. And so we've worked with Dominion, and they've done some preliminary design, so there are LED shoebox lights that will work for pathways with the distribution necessary. It'll be about 80 feet apart roughly. So yes, and we're using the guidance that the EAC actually put forth in terms of the Kelvin color. We're looking at timers, so they're not on all night. I got information from a member today about some lights that we could possibly use in sunny areas that are solar. So, Yeah, again, and so this is gonna be, we go to the DRB, there's gonna be broad notice of lots of people affected there, but the extent that we're proposing now versus then is about a quarter of what was originally proposed.
Karen?
And just to add a little bit to that, because what was originally approved was a plan for 52 lights, right? Yeah. But that was gonna cost over $300,000, and the amount that was approved back in 2013 for 2014 was 125, Larry? Right? The original amount that was budgeted back in 2014 was about 125,000. So even then, with the proffer that we recently got from Trails Edge, we were still gonna be $100,000 or so short on that. So we're now down to 16, I think, lights, which would give us a big chunk of money to, start going with the design and possible implementation of something to repurpose the ball field, to make it more welcoming and safe. And a lot of the issues that are going on there are happening in the daytime. Of course, the unfortunate homicide that happened was in the middle of the night.
So what I want to do, so this is the map that's in the packet. So this was the original scope that we had approved by the Design Review Board using non-LED, the old metal halide and so forth. What's in yellow is already lighted, and so Escalante Court actually has existing lights up there. So we were going to tie into that, come down past South Lakes Drive Park and so forth. So what's recommended in this request is to pick up here by the underpass, this is Hunters Woods and Trails Edge is right here, and do this first string back around up to and adjacent to Christ the Servant Lutheran Church. Possibly considering this, because this also comes up to the Hunters Woods Village Condominium Association, but right now, it's this single strand behind the village center.
Ball field then.
The ball field is right here.
Okay.
And those would go behind Fellowship House, some of those, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Julie?
And most of the work that we've done over the years, we've also engaged the pedestrian light working group, right? I mean, they've come and presented to us several times.
Well, it's the guidance that they put together
Yeah,
for the type of lighting and so forth that we work with EAC on, and that's what we're
right,
proposing.
okay. And when we start looking at how that ball field, this ball field now, is used, I think about getting some insight from perhaps the sports council, or you mentioned 6 pickleball, it's not a whole lot of equipment for pickleball. Not like bats, bag balls.
So Larry, what are you asking us to do?
There's a motion in the packet. It's to authorize staff to direct staff to allocate a portion. And I say a portion because until we've, worked with the community and so forth, one of the first things I think we want to do is working with the stakeholders is engage a landscape architect to work with us on, kind of opportunities and constraints, because there are some utilities out there, in the ball field area and some other things. So I don't have a specific, number ultimately what that would be, but it gives us the flexibility to at least begin the process to look at the ball field as well.
Okay.
Madam President, I move to direct staff to reallocate a portion of the previously approved capital asset acquisition reserve funds for the full Hunter Woods Pathway Lighting Project to study, design, and implement the repurposing of the Hunter Woods ball field in conformance with guidance provided by Fairfax County.
Second. Karen has been working really hard with the Hunters Woods Coalition and Larry and whatnot. And I've been to a couple of the meetings and I know how strongly they feel about feeling safer. Any questions? Yes, Aaron?
So, in the way this is worded, it sounds like it's an action for staff to take, which seems like a different tack that we've taken with the Pony Barn and Hook Road, where a working group was created to address this issue. So I'm wondering why we would take a different tack here. Yeah.
The primary reason for that is that there's already a coalition of all the stakeholders that has been at work for 5-6 years, working on that specific area. And we would utilize their existing engagement and talents to help do this.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Doug?
Just a comment. I attended the Fairfax County Environmental Quality Advisory Council meeting this last month, and they indicated off the record that they probably will pass a new regulation or guidance on lighting of 3,000 degree Kelvin color before the end of this year.
Okay.
So I think that goes along with recommendations here.
Julie?
It does.
Just one tidbit on the Colts Neck underpass. That artwork, the public art work is to be done. I think the opening is going to be about October 16th or 17th. I'll send that, but that includes lighting through that underpass. So having lights before and after would be a nice addition.
Karen?
I was just, as an aside, I went over to the underpass today and it's almost complete.
Yeah.
It is amazing. So
I'm going to
excited.
call the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
And noes?
Aye.
Thank you. Abstentions? Motion carries.
The second item I just wanted to brief the board on, and a couple of our board members were there last night, is Campus Commons redevelopment. So the Planning Commission hearing was last night. They changed the agenda, I wouldn't say at the 11th hour, we'll call it the 9th hour, which they often do because there were a lot of speakers there, as you can well imagine. I think there were probably, 50 Reston residents there, and about 22. 60, I didn't count it.
I did.
I'm close, right? Yeah, I'm close. And I didn't count the exact number of speakers. I wrote them all down, but still 20 plus speakers. And it went till about 1:39 in the morning. That's when Kathy, who watched it, I guess, emailed said, you hung out. Essentially, the Planning Commission deferred for decision only, which they often do when there's a large crowd testifying, till October 10th, which is 5 days before the Board of Supervisors, the currently scheduled Board of Supervisors public hearing on that matter.
And that is the last one, right? For
That-
the year, for this county.
Well, yeah, that's
Last one for
the
this
last
board.
required decision for them to get their rezoning and their entitlements and so forth. So my hunch is that there's going to be a lot of discussions between the county staff, the planning commissioner, hopefully the public, with TF Cornerstone on that, because there were a number of, and I'm not going to go into all the things that were mentioned, but building heights, density, a whole lot of discussion about pedestrian traffic, particularly the crosswalk, wheelie, RA membership, lots of different things. And so we'll find out hopefully soon. As most of the board here knows, and I think the general public knows, we have met with TF Cornerstone on a couple of occasions to talk to them about joining Reston Association as members in some way, shape, or form. Those conversations continuing. We don't have another meeting set up, but I just wanted to, let you all know and the public who may be watching that right now, the next opportunity to actually speak on it right now, based on what I know at this point, would be the public hearing at the Board of Supervisors. My hope actually is that there'll be a lot of traction with a lot of the comments and suggestion changes that were heard last night. And so that is my report out on that. And Kathy, you watched it, and Julie, you were there, and John, you were there, so if you want to chime in, feel free.
Now, I said to somebody, it's been a long time since I've stayed up past midnight, but thank you, Larry.
Yeah, I would only say that the neighbors of Campus Commons, I thought, did a really fine job in working together in a very short time period to articulate very well their key concerns. It was another, I think, and they were very respectful, but very forceful in what they said. And I think it is another wonderful example of engagement at the county level by Reston members.
Yeah. Oh,
Julie?
I'd like to comment and actually compliment John Carter in his comments that really, he spoke to honoring the greenness of our community and having the softening around major developments. And then as a whole, and I don't really remember which particular member of that board spoke to it, but I got in this time a sense of, hey, we can't keep looking at things as silos, individual projects. We've really got to deal with the traffic, you know, from end to end, as I see it, from Barron Cameron to Sunrise Valley in terms of that traffic flow on Greeley and having some consistency in terms of pedestrians being able to get across, bicyclists getting from south to north. And that, I was pleased to hear them speak to that concern.
And I would just add, and just follow up with you, I think the speakers, you know, they went back to a lot of what we had done with the PRC, and I think they really based a lot of their comments on, you know, the comprehensive plan, you know, kind of the factual pieces, the guidance that the plan gives. And so I thought that was really effective. Yeah.
Okay, moving right along. We're ahead of schedule. Hank, strategic plan.
At your seats, you should have two documents. One says 2022 strategic plan, core values, vision, mission, and organizational aspirations. And then you should have a staple piece that has goals 1 through 7 with their supporting objectives. This all was approved to bring to your attention by the BGC. But hearing John's comments, I'm not exactly sure what you want me to do with it tonight, because where we are in the strategic plan is we're at a point where if you all approve the core values, the vision, the mission, and the aspirations, which have been slightly, the core values, vision, and mission have been slightly modified by the BGC. They then agreed that having aspirations as an institution, as an organization, was important, and these are the 7 for which they've agreed to move forward. I will also mention that all of this has been through the senior team as well, and they've also supported this. So this new piece where it says core values, vision, mission, and aspirations will be built into the strategic plan, along with the 7 goals and objectives, and you'll see that the 7 goals essentially mirror the aspirations. So I'm at a point where if you want me to proceed with this, then I can. What I've actually done, and we as the senior team have done, is build out literally every one of these goals and objectives into a full strategy, which includes KPIs, specific strategies, tactics, and metrics, which are not included because there was some debate at the BGC that they disagreed with some of these tactics. And I guess my perspective is I'm not sure where this board wants me to go with this at this point. Because as a governing board approves the goals and objectives, staff then works in the specific tactics. But if you all want to go over the specific tactics, then I can put that together and we can take another route. But where we are right now is I'm at the point where I need to build this out for all of you to decide and put it together for you all to vote in the next, for at least in the first draft by sometime in October. And then take edits and adjustments and build it out so that we're ready to approve the strategic plan by the end of the year.
Julie?
And my fellow governance committee members, we did certainly spend a fair bit of time on both of these items. And I think that we as a group were very comfortable with both the core values, missions, organizational aspirations. So from that perspective, I certainly would like to have the full board give a go on that. On the goals and objectives, which I think at a high level, we were all comfortable with. And as I've said before, I do believe that some of our budget decisions will help you on the next, the lower, deep, the devil's in the details perhaps. But I would also like to hear the full board have a vote of confidence on this document as presented and as the governance committee was comfortable with overall. So
Is that a motion?
I will make that a motion so that we can discuss. Yes, I would like the board to give a vote of confidence and endorse these two documents.
So you're speaking of the goals and the objectives.
Right.
Ben?
I'd like to clarify that you're holding both those documents up, but at the BGC, we voted to present and recommend this document, which is the goals and objectives. We did debate about core values, vision, mission, and aspiration. Basically, this document, the core vision, mission, and aspirations is the place where the KPIs, and that's the how. So this is what we are going to achieve, right? The goals and objectives is what we are going to achieve, what is it that we're trying to achieve, and this is talking about the how. The problem that some of us within the BGC had on the how.
This isn't the how.
This is not the.
And we had discussed this in a previous meeting. I'm sorry.
Within, this is the only document we voted on.
The goals and objectives.
Goals and objectives is the document we voted on. The other matter in there had.
We voted on this in June 20th.
This is previously approved.
Yeah.
I understand that, but it was fleshed out in that other document that was presented at the BGC. And correct me if I'm wrong, but this in itself is fine. But the document that was presented to the BGC was this plus this, fleshed out with the KPIs and what you wanted to
This
achieve.
was presented on June 20th and approved by the BGC.
That document itself I'm fine with, yeah.
Right.
Karen?
So the only thing that the BGC voted on sending to the board is this right here, the goals and objectives. There are some committee members, I was not one of them, but who felt that some more discussion was needed on the tactics and KPIs and metrics and all of that.
Okay.
So
All right, yeah, this, maybe I thought that that's what was fleshed out in the other document, but that's where I wanted to go. I'm trying to find the document.
Okay, Julie, you're being questioned because your motion calls for both of these documents to be approved by the board tonight. She held them both up, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
It's fine, I think I'm clear now. That other document, what you're saying is the copy of the June document, right?
Julie, what is your motion?
Okay, I know that on the values, missions, organizational aspirations, we had approved that. I do not believe that it came before the board for its full approval. So that is this document.
Yes.
This document, which is the goals and objectives, were, and I'm trying to pull out from my notebook, but I think I have it, were the top 2 lines of a very long, detailed document that covered here's what it was.
Okay.
Right,
Can I
yes.
take a look at?
Sure. And that addressed not only the goals and objectives, but went further detail down into thank you, KPI strategies, as you named it, tactics and metrics. And our feeling was, my feeling was that we had agreement at the top level.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm asking for support from the full board so that Hank can proceed and the staff can proceed with a direction. I believe that the lower level items were the ones that, as John referred to earlier, there was suggestion was to have a separate board session to talk about those just by themselves. That didn't get passed tonight, but many of those items that we started discussing ended up being things that related to the budget. Thus, my feeling that as we dealt with the elephants in the room in a separate board session on the budget, we might be able to give Hank some additional guidance in those specific areas.
John?
I'd like to address the very important question that Hank raised and that if, about the board as a governing board properly addressing itself to the goals and objectives, and I agree with that. I guess my concern, which I have expressed at the board governance committee meeting, is that some of the issues labeled as tactics were of such policy import that I thought they were more than tactics. So one was, for example, what is frequently called compensation philosophy, which is what do we aspire to, where do we aspire to position ourselves in the job market? And I know that the surrounding counties, that is actually the compensation philosophy is actually a policy adopted by the Board of Supervisors or the county board or the city council. The second was more just kind of understanding other tactics, like I'm interested in, when we first interviewed you, and ever since, many of us, myself very much included, have applauded our new CEOs, they're not new anymore, our CEOs' desire to raise non-assessment revenues. One concern I have about the tactic, this is more clarification, is what are the implications of that for Reston Association, which is a 501c4 organization. So what are the tax implications? So there are those kinds of things that I believe that is a tactic, unlike the compensation philosophy, which I consider to be a policy. But I just want to hear, before we embark on a series of budget endorsements on these initiatives, what are the implications for a 501c4 tax status?
I can address that if you'd like me to, the tax ramifications, because I did bring that issue to Tom. And if you don't know Tom's background, he's a CPA and a former auditor. Okay. And when he looked at our financials and where our position is, right now we don't have any tax liability. I might be phrasing this wrong, Tom. We don't have any tax liability for unrelated business income for a long, long time. We'd have to start making a significant amount of money before that would be an issue for us. And so I guess the question I come back to the group with is, when you all brought me on, one of the major criteria was to look for and find non-assessment revenue. If that is indeed changing, because that's built into the budget, if that is indeed changing, I think we need to know that.
Okay, well,
what I said does not change my position. I'm still as enthusiastic as I was before we hired you, after interviewing you. It's wanting to make sure that we do nothing to in any way complicate our 501c4 status.
But we have an expert on staff when it comes to audits and as a CPA, and I trust what he shares with us.
I think though that following up on Julie's point, these things will, whether it's a compensation policy, how we deal with it, it's gonna come up in our budget session. Or you can certainly bring it up in the budget session.
The only other thing I would comment on the compensation piece is that all that's been incorporated in here is the recommendations from the study the board authorized us, asked us to do. So that's what you're seeing spread out in here. We are just following the direction of the organization you all instructed us to hire. The other thing I also want to point out is the board in 2012 hired the same group to do the same study. So it is not like we're picking someone who doesn't have credentials or had the value of a previous board.
Again, I'm not questioning that part. I'm talking about whose responsibility is it not to do the pay scale, not to do any of that stuff, which what the Archer report was about, but the compensation philosophy, which is a very high-level policy statement about our positioning ourselves in the market.
I see.
Can I say something? So I think we're all in agreement about getting in as much non-assessment revenue as we can. And frankly, I don't think revenue is so much tied to the budget. So let's say you come up with a non-assessment revenue channel, okay? And it's being vetted out by the fiscal committee. And as a board, we are in agreement. It can be implemented in the middle of next year. It doesn't have to wait until the next budget year.
Okay, I think we're getting off topic though. Julie, you have a motion. Would you repeat your motion, please?
I would like the board to approve the document, the two documents that Hank shared with us tonight. One being the 2020 to 2022 strategic planning, core values, vision, mission, and organizational aspirations, single sheet. So that would be motion A. If it's easier to be in two pieces,
I second that motion.
Okay, we're doing it that, okay. Any discussion on that?
on a single document.
Okay. All the ayes?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Any noes?
Aye.
Thank you. Abstentions? Motion carries. That one's done.
I'd like to make a second motion that speaks to the strategic plan 2020 to 2022 goals and objectives. It's only those two items. It's a 3-page document and goes through seven goals that reflect both our, as I said, our goals and the objectives. So that I would like the board to also vote their approval to give our CEO and staff guidance.
Second?
Any discussion?
It's a friendly amendment. We adopt this and direct the board to discuss compensation philosophy in our next session. Is that?
In that working session?
In that working session.
You're making an
Friendly
amendment.
amendment, yes.
Will somebody second his? I'll second it. Okay, so we have to vote on his before we vote on yours.
Okay.
Does everybody get what he's?
Yeah.
Can you define what's a compensation policy here?
Compensation philosophy is how an organization, it's a statement of how the organization will position itself relative to the rest of the job market. So in other words, what salary range and what quartile, for example, of salary ranges do we want to position ourselves in order to hire a large enough number, talent, happy, and people who want to stay with us.
And that would obviously impact our budget.
Right. And in the surrounding counties, Arlington, Fairfax, Loudoun, Prince William, and the city of Alexandria, this is a policy statement by the board. So.
Okay, Aaron.
So my question relates to where our involvement comes down to as a board, as a governing board. Of the the tactics and the KPIs and those sorts of things, is the compensation positioning the only one that felt like it was something higher level?
Then a tactic.
Okay, I'm worried about the board approving every document and not giving our CEO enough room to run with. So I would be hesitant to nickel and dime him on items like this.
Absolutely.
If this is the only one and we approve these two documents and everything below he has free range for, I would feel a lot more comfortable with this being the only exception.
Yeah, I have no other questions about tactic. In other words, I do not want to examine board responsibility for any other tactic. That was labeled tactic. It seemed to me to raise to the level of a rather high policy question.
Let me explain why this is an issue, what's in this document. It's not just a policy document. It talks about, for example, increasing the 401k contribution from the current level to 2, 3, 5 percentages, who knows how many percentages more, to make RA the top place for employees to work within an organization. I think that's a very lofty goal and a very abstract statement. And once you pass that as a motion through this document, all of a sudden that becomes guidance for what should be, the payroll costs.
So my question is, there's 7 goals, and so there are gonna be 7 KPIs and strategies and things. And if the only one that's producing heartburn is on compensation, then I can be on board with that. If we're gonna try and do this for every one of the 7, I think we're gonna need to put our CEO in a straitjacket.
Exactly.
And we'll end up micromanaging.
In complete agreement.
Which is why.
Okay, so the friendly amendment that's on the floor is that
That we direct the board to discuss the compensation philosophy at its next meeting in special session.
any other discussion on the friendly amendment? All right.
Just so I'm clear, so what is the board's intent? The full board has not seen the rest of the draft strategic plan with all the tactics and KPIs and things. So what is our plan going forward so that Hank and staff can get going?
So in my mind, the governance committee said the board is not going to get involved in below these 2 lines.
That's fine. That's what I needed clarified, so we don't, that doesn't have to come before the board. The rest of
Mr.
the
Mooney objected to that. The vote was, this is what we're bringing to the board. It has now been back on to us to have compensation policy philosophy discussion. That's his amendment to her. I don't even remember what hers was. Okay, I'm ready to call the vote.
So then things can move forward once we have that discussion?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
All the ayes
This is
for
on the
adding, to add the compensation discussion. Aye. Any noes? Any abstentions? Are you a no or abstention?
Yeah, I'll abstain.
Okay, motion carries.
Now mine.
Julie?
I would like the board, thank you, to vote to support the 7 goals and objectives as presented to you tonight, this lovely 3-page document.
Second.
Yes.
Doug?
Cole?
Well, I have a comment, and I like to see objectives that you can measure and say whether you've met them or not. And I read this all this way, and I have not seen your tactics and your KPIs, but in reading the words on here, although some of these may require surveys to get the answers, they all can be measured except, in my opinion, goal number 5, objective number 3, which is written as very subjectively. So I just don't think that is a good statement of an objective.
I can reword that, but Can I comment?
Of course.
We have just completed a pretty comprehensive survey, the first draft of this with a brand study. We've gotten about 1,600 responses, and in it, it clearly talks about whether or not we're listening or not listening. This would probably have to, this is a 3-year strategy. Something along this lines would probably should be done 2 or 3 years out. And so in writing it, we were thinking that we would be able to survey how well we did against what we currently have as base, and then any things we put in here, we then could measure new. But I can also work on rewording that if it makes you feel more comfortable. Yes, I'm sorry.
Julie.
So, because you didn't have the devil's in the detail, the KPIs, strategies, tactics for that section, in the keenly listen, it talks about, and these were things that I would expect the CEO and staff to execute, staff feedback based on observation of customer members' interaction with our services and products, the number of quality new ideas presented to utilize a cross-section of digital platforms and town hall techniques in order to listen to our customer needs, to exponentially improve our service quality, to optimize existing services and products, expand existing business, find innovative, and RA's, and in the metrics, RA's ability to be nimble as measured by conceiving, testing, and ultimately implementing at least one innovative idea. So he's got, and that's just one column that I read out of there, but there's a lot in the KPI strategy. I have a little trouble with the words that use. KPI strategies, tactics, and metrics. So I felt that they had given significant thought into how they were going to measure, that it wasn't just you took the aspirational, they spent a lot of time in the staff to drill down on, okay, so how are we going to prove to the board we did what we said? How did we earn our keep?
And just as one example, the back page of this most recent survey, and you all will get a copy of this when we finalize it. The number one thing Reston Association members want from us is a community app where residents and visitors can navigate area easily, plan activities, buy tickets, and get alerts. That ties directly into what you just asked me to do, because then they give us immediate feedback. And that was number one over everything, including indoor tennis.
So that, for example, is one, that example that you just gave, by approving this document, let's say if we did, for example, one KPI is to eliminate programs that are no longer of any relevance to customers. That I agree, yes, we should do that. But in that example of an app, if we approve this document, does that mean we are also approving the staff to go out and build a new app?
No, not until the budget's approved.
Okay, so then that has to be clarified.
Well,
Because
what this is, Dan, I'm sorry you even brought it up now, because what this is a survey material that's giving us recommendations of what our customers want, what our members want, and they've rated them. So, and it's 1,600 surveys that have come back in here and told us what they want. It's very clear. It's the sort of work I told you before that will help guide and support the strategies and actually help us fine tune the strategies, our budget, and the things that's actually been proposed in the current 2020 budget. Giving our customers what they want is paramount to what we need to do. And this piece of document here and others that we've been working on will guide us on that path.
Okay, I'm going to call the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any noes?
Aye.
Thank you. Any noes? Any abstentions?
what did we just vote on, this document?
Yes.
Which way did you vote?
I voted aye.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, you're going to get cut off. I'm going to have a motion to go into executive session, please.
So move. Second.
And then do we call them back?
Tom, we're not going to call you back, okay?
Gotta vote.
Oh, sounds good.
All the ayes?
Oh, well.
Noes?
Aye.
Abstentions? Motion carries. Turn off the mics.
Thank you.
Okay, we are out of executive session.
Madam President, I move that the Reston Association Board of Directors certifies to the best of each member's knowledge that only those matters appropriate for executive session of a personnel, contractual, or legal nature were heard, discussed, or considered by the board during an executive session.
Second. All the ayes? Any nays? Abstentions? Motion carries.
Madam President, I move to ratify the decision reached in executive session to adopt the August Legal Committee's report and affirm the decisions reached.
Second.
Second.
All the ayes?
Aye.
Noes? Abstentions?
Madam President, I move that after a competitive bidding process and in accordance with the association's policies on purchasing and procurement, to approve the service agreement with Lake Services, Inc. as presented in executive session.
Second.
Second.
All the ayes?
Aye.
Noes? Abstentions? Motion carries.
Madam President, I move to add an executive session to the special budget meeting to discuss a contractual legal matter.
Second.
All the ayes?
Aye.
Noes? Abstentions? Motion carries. And go ahead, Eric.
President, I move to adjourn.
Second.
Aye.
Better vote on that.